All right, so we're doing a re-recording. This is a make-believe recording of yesterday's lesson. I'm now wearing St. Patrick's Day, so I'm wearing my green for St. Patrick's Day. But we had some technical glitch with yesterday's recording, so we're redoing it today. So those of you who are watching this as a recording to prepare for a small group, or if you're just watching it for your own enlightenment, I'm glad you're here with us for this experience. We'll try to make it, since I've got all my notes, pretty much close to what we did yesterday with our small group situation. So let me first ask, how many of you know more about the Ark of the Covenant from the old Indiana Jones movie than you do from the Bible? Okay, just for reference, about half the group raised their hands. So the Ark of the Covenant, though we kind of vaguely might know about this, we don't really know what it's for or what happened. And yes, the Indiana Jones movie is our most popular reference to it. The problem is that the Indiana Jones movie was not a documentary. Okay, it is not theologically or biblically accurate. The Ark of the Covenant does not kill Nazis, by the way, just in case you were wondering. Also, the other Indiana Jones about the Holy Grail, that also was not a documentary, although I would say that the moment when they show you the ancient city of Petra, that was kind of like a National Geographic moment. So that might confuse you with that. So let's give a little bit of background to our lesson today from Scripture about the Ark of the Covenant. So the Ark of the Covenant was this container that the ancient Israelites used, where they placed the 10 Commandments that Moses brought down, the stone tablets that he brought down from Mount Sinai, and they placed them in the ark, and the ancient Israelites carried the ark with them when they went to the promised land. And they also took it with them whenever they went to battle against another peoples. It was kind of seen like the Ark of the Covenant represented God's presence with them. They had a sense that when the ark was there, God's presence was there. It, in some ways, was treated like a lucky charm, in that the belief was when the Ark of the Covenant was with them, God's presence was with them, and they would have victory. So when they finally settled in the land of Canaan, they built a temple in the city of or town of Shiloh, and there they placed the Ark of the Covenant, and it was there for some time. Around the year 1000 BC, give or take a few decades, the Philistines attacked the city of Shiloh, overran the town, ransacked anything of value, including the temple, and they took the Ark of the Covenant with them. Now, if you ever read, look up 2 Samuel chapter 5, there's a quite humorous story about what happens when the Philistines put the Ark of the Covenant in the temple next to one of the idols of the gods they worship. So just read it on your own time, 2 Samuel chapter 5. It's a quite funny story. So I hope you enjoy reading that on your own. So anyways, when David became king of Judah, he was king of Judah for 7 years, and then became king of all of Israel for 33 years. When David became king and had defeated the Jebusites who lived in the city of Jerusalem, David wanted to make Jerusalem the capital city. He also wanted to make it the holy city where the Ark of the Covenant would be, so that all the Israelites would come to Jerusalem as the religious capital and as the kind of administrative capital of the country. So he wanted to bring the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. So when they began doing this, they put the ark in an ox cart and began moving it up to Jerusalem. At some point in the journey, the ox cart kind of stumbles or hits a pothole in the road. Remember, they did not have concrete or asphalt roads then. One person feared that the ark was going to fall out of the ox cart onto the ground, and so he reaches up and grabs this. He simultaneously saves the ark from being destroyed or damaged, and at the same time, he loses his life because he touched the ark. At this point, King David decides, this is bad luck. This thing is bad luck. I do not want to take this to Jerusalem. So he ends up sending it to a household the gentleman who was the head of the household, his name is Obed Edom. And the ark stayed at his home for several months. Now, also interesting is Obed Edom was a Gittite. Last week in our story, somebody else was a Gittite. It was Goliath. So we think here Goliath is the enemy of the Israelites, and he's a Gittite. And now a person who is with the Israelites or friendly with the Israelites is going to house the Ark of the Covenant. And he also is a Gittite. So it just kind of shows you that these people groups were all interchanged with one another. It wasn't like the Philistines were over there and the Israelites are over here. They were all intermingled with each other. So one week, a Gittite is the enemy and the villain, and the next week, a Gittite is a hero, somebody who helps out the Israelites. So it just helps you remind these stories are all intertwined with these people groups at this time. So you'll notice in the scripture passages you have with you that I've sent with you, there's two things about the scripture passages. There are some phrases in red, and I want you to focus in on those. It's some key passage to read, both from the 2 Samuel passage and from the 1 Chronicles passage. Secondly, there are some phrases that I have in italics. The phrases in italics are in both stories, that they have been copied either literally word for word or almost word for word. So I want to make sure that you saw those and could compare both of those notes. You could see what words were in both stories. So back to the ark. So our story begins in 2 Samuel when someone tells David that Obed, who's been housing the Ark of the Covenant, has suddenly prospered and been blessed in an overwhelming way. This convinces David that the ark really is a good luck charm, and he should go ahead and bring it to Jerusalem. So a second attempt is made to bring the ark into Jerusalem, and this is where we pick up our story. In this story, in both the Samuel account and in the Chronicles account, the story is about ritual reverence and jubilant celebration. Both stories contain both of those pieces: ritual reverence and jubilant celebration. So as they begin their journey to the ark, David sacrifices 2 animals and presents them to God after only 6 paces on the journey. Now, I would say that the way that the phrase is read in ancient Hebrew, it could mean that every 6 paces, David does the same thing, which would have been an enormous amount of sacrifices along the way. It's debatable as to whether what the meaning is one time or several times. In any case, the point is made. David is trying to make sure he does the right rituals before he brings the ark into Jerusalem. The second thing, the detail, is that David wore a linen ephod. This was his underwear. Think of David's underwear as being loose-fitting boxers. The description is also more definitive than that. It also tells us that he was wearing the underwear of priests. So to kind of prepare things in a ritual way, David wanted to make sure that he was wearing the right clothes. And so he's wearing priest's underwear underneath his clothing as he's heading on this journey. More about that in a moment. So the fact that David is doing these rituals is not the headline of the story. In the 2 Samuel version, the focus is not on the rituals. The focus is on the jubilant celebration. So the focus in the story in Samuel is all about David's dancing. David danced before the Lord with all his might, said verse 14. And all of Israel would then join David in shouting and singing with the sound of trumpets. As they enter the city, David is said to be leaping and dancing, not just dancing, leaping and dancing before the Lord. David's sweaty skin, glistening in the sun, is seen because by now he is down to his underwear. Yes, this loose-fitting underwear, these boxers that he's wearing. And when they place the ark in the central plaza, underneath this tent that David has constructed for the ark, David is going around the Ark of the Covenant like a whirling dervish. So everyone's focus is on David's dancing, the king of Israel, and his jubilant celebration More rituals are then performed, and then there's a party. Food is distributed to all the people who are gathered. Both accounts mention that bread, meat, and sweets are offered to all the people. And then the author says, and all the people went back to their homes, which included David. Now, key to this piece is that David goes home to his wife, Michal. In the 2 Samuel piece, if you're glancing through the story, you see that Michal was not happy. Michal was the daughter of Saul. From last week's lesson, when David defeated Goliath, as a reward for killing Goliath, Michal becomes his bride. So now she is a connecting point between both stories. So she's up in the royal palace when David brings the ark into Jerusalem and he's leaping and dancing. She looks out the palace window and she despised him in her heart. Verse 16, she despised him in her heart. When he arrives home later, after the party where everybody gets food, the sweets, the bread, and the meat, when he goes home, she scolds him. She scolds him for his vulgar display of dancing in his underwear, exposing himself to young girls, because, of course, young girls have to be protected from such things. David's reply to Michal is this: it was before the Lord who chose me in the place of your father and all of his household. The emphasis here is on Saul's family is not chosen and David is chosen. It was before the Lord who chose me in the place of your father and all of his household to appoint me as prince over Israel, the people of the Lord. I will dance before the Lord, and I will make myself yet more contemptible than this, and I will be humbled in my own eyes. But by the maids of whom you have spoken, I shall be held in honor. This story kind of glances over however risque David's dancing was. He said it was all offered to the Lord. And because of that, he would be held in honor for not holding anything back. So the focus in all of this first story, the Samuel story, is on devotion to God, exuberant devotion. Devotion that even goes to maybe even exposing yourself. In Michal's eyes, this was vulgar of what he had done. In David's eyes, your emotional devotion to the Lord shows your true heart. And so there are no bounds or limits on that. The first story gives us this tale, this version of bringing the ark into Jerusalem. And the focus is all on how much love and devotion and emotion and exuberance you use to show that love for God in the way you're worshiping God. That's version 1. The second version comes from Chronicles, chapter 15 and 16. This focus is the same story, but it's told in a very different way. In this story, David's dancing is mentioned. So we get a little bit of noise in the background, but we'll be all right. So in this story, David's dancing is mentioned, but it's not the highlight. The highlights are the religious rituals that mark the occasion of bringing the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem. Chronicles is the longer version, but most of its verses are spent listing the name of the Israelites, the Levites, who carried the Ark of the Covenant. And in Chronicles version, they carry it the proper way. They have it on long poles. Now, actually, this is one part the Raiders of the Lost Ark did get correct. They pulled the ark, they carried the ark on long poles that slipped through holes on the ark, and then they could safely carry it without touching the ark. So in Chronicles version, they make sure they do it the right way. They carry it on these long poles, and all the names of all the people who will be carrying the ark are mentioned, as well as all those people who would be the musicians, who would be singing the proper psalms. They were also mentioned. The Levites who offered prayers of invocation and thanksgivings and praises to God, they are also mentioned. And then finally, a long thanksgiving prayer by King David himself is also listed. So the reason the Chronicles story is longer is because it is talking about all the rituals that go on to make the occasion the way God would want it to happen. So lots of details about all the prayers, about all the rituals, make this story longer in Chronicles than it was in 2 Samuel. In this story, it does mention that David dances, but the focus is on the ritual. It notes that Michal did watch David from the royal palace window, and she despised him with her heart. However, at the end of the story, when everyone went home to their households, it just says, and David went home to bless his household, and that's the end of the story. Chronicles does not tell us about how once arriving back to the house, Michal scolds him about how he had exposed himself to the young maidens. As far as Chronicles is concerned, David never crossed any lines. In fact, while David did wear the priestly underwear, Chronicles is also very clear to say that David had a royal robe over top his underwear. So David was dancing in his robe, not his underwear, in Chronicles. The contrast of these two versions of the story, it's the same story, the entrance of the ark into Jerusalem. The contrast, these two versions, Samuel's version and Chronicles' version, forces us to ask questions about the meaning of true worship. One version, Chronicles, written by the temple priests, by the way, who might have been biased towards proper worship. Written by the proper priests, it emphasizes ritual as the key to true worship in God, from rituals done from the psalms prayed and sung to the proper preparation of the priests. The older version, Samuel, which was written about 300 years before Chronicles, the older version emphasizes the exuberant celebration of God's goodness as a key to true worship. It doesn't even matter that King David exposed himself in wild dancing before the ark. Pietistic moralities don't matter when one's heart is true and your devotion is given to God. We still debate about how to truly worship God today. And we swing between these two poles, right? We swing between these two poles, and it's a conversation here at Fifth Avenue between ritual reverence and jubilant celebration. The worship wars of the past 20 years in evangelical Christianity have often pitted traditional hymns and choirs and organ music against praise songs and bands with guitars and percussion instruments. All of this only touches the tip of the iceberg. I want to emphasize this debate and this conversation isn't just about how you sing music. It's about issues much deeper than that. And to get to the really true heart of what does it mean to truly worship God, a beginning point is these two stories about how the Israelites brought the ark into Jerusalem and what was the proper way to worship God at this key moment. I want to leave you with one last idea. We have one of the great commandments is that we are to love God with our heart, mind, soul, and strength. Well, what if one idea of devotion to love God with all your heart, your emotion, with all your soul, your spirit, with all your mind, your intellect, with all your strength, your physical body? What if we talked about what would worship look like if it touched all those parts of us? Mind and body and spirit and emotion. If we could create and develop worship that would touch all those parts of us, maybe we would be on a pathway to worshiping God with our whole self. All right, that's the redo of our lesson from yesterday. So I hope between this video and the material I sent out to you, you can be able to kind of get a sense of how the discussion went. If you want to join us on Wednesday night for an in-person small group, or for a Zoom event on Thursday. If you will please contact me, email me, or send me a text or give me a phone call, we'll set those things up for you. Otherwise, next week is David and Bathsheba. You don't want to miss that. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.